Hello, everyone. Oh, my other computer's making noises. Hold on. There we go. All right. How's everyone doing? Hope you're all right. It's been a minute since I did a live stream. So I did say, actually, I think my last live was on Letecia about malingering. We looked at the personality survey that they brought up in court, the MMPI-2. That was my last live, and about how that scale potentially picks up malingering. But I haven't done one since. And I did say I'd be back once the mental health experts started to testify. I'd be back with more thoughts. So I'm here. So what did you make today's testimony? Got a little bit spicy towards the end there, didn't it? Yeah, the defense have had to wake up from their slumber and have to, you know, I've had to do something. But as I've continued to say, every time I've discussed Letecia, even before the trial started, I said, actually, a live stream that I did before the trial started, if you go back, it was even before jury selection started. And I think it was titled something like, is DID our only defense? And it seems very much like, I was just speculating then, but it does seem like DID is our only defense. And it's the one thing that the defense is going to challenge. And that's it. And that's it. Who's a member for 1 month? Oh, Skittles, member for 1 month. Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Because in that live, I talked about the not guilty by reason of insanity defense and how difficult it is to prove that you were insane, right? At the time a crime occurred that happened 3 years previous. But of course, all the defense have to do, they don't have to prove anything. So, you know, are they onto a winner? Because they don't have to prove that she was insane. They just have to put in enough reasonable doubt into the jury's minds for them to not be confident with a guilty charge or a guilty verdict. However, what I'm going to talk about in this live stream is I'm going to give you my opinion on whether or not Letecia has DID. And obviously that's just my opinion. I don't know Letecia, never spoken to Letecia. I'm never going to speak to Letecia. And it's purely from the testimony that we've heard at the trial so far. Sheba and Sherry, welcome. Thank you for joining the Secret Agents Club. Welcome to the memberships. It's very kind of you. And now I've completely lost my train of thought. It is midnight over here in the UK, and I have been watching the trial for the last 8 hours. So my head's a little bit bashed. But I'll try to keep on track here. Not that I normally keep on track, but I'll try. I'll try. Yeah, based on the crime, based on my following this case, based on the many lies Letecia's told, before the trial started, I said, I cannot see how Letecia has DID. that's even before considering it as a defense, right? Nothing Letecia did during the immediate aftermath of Gannon's murder, none of the lies she told throughout the entire weeks and weeks that she continued to lie, and in the 3 years up to her trial, where she's also continued to lie, right? That is not indicative, in my opinion, right? It's not indicative of a murder that was committed under the influence of an alternate personality. Having heard the testimony so far, and as the prosecution are now nearly at the end, unless the defense can pull something really spectacular out of the bag, I'm still going to maintain that I do not think Letecia has DID. Those phone calls with Al solidified it for me, because there is nothing at all in those phone calls that I saw other than Letecia lying and enjoying lying. She was enjoying the fact that Al was clearly distressed. And if, let's say, hypothetically, that the murder had been done by someone who was under the influence of an alternate personality, an evil personality, let's just take a stereotypical view of DID for a moment, and let's say Letecia is Dr. Jekyll, who's the good doctor, the well-respected person, and Mr. Hyde is the evil person who goes around murdering people. Let's take that very stereotypical novelistic view of DID, because Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde essentially was a tale of DID, right? Kind of. And say that occurred. Well, surely once Letecia had come back to, her normal person, to Dr. Jekyll, wouldn't she have been absolutely, utterly mortified by what she'd done? Yes, she would have done. But there's an even more pertinent question that we need to ask, and I've answered it before. I've asked it of myself, and I've talked about it in lives on this case. And that is, even if Letecia has DID, she really, really has it, that this isn't just another figment of her imagination or another lie, that she really has DID, which is possible. Anything's possible, right? That, she's got a form of DID that isn't readily noticed by people, even her own daughter. The other thing that solidified her not having DID for me was Harley's testimony, because Harley had never noticed her mother behaving in a way that would in any way indicate DID, right? But even if, let's just say hypothetically, that Harley had said, yes, my mother would sometimes speak in a Spanish accent, she'd sometimes, things would appear in the house and we didn't, my mother didn't know where she got them from, or she'd lose hours at a time, or any of her other family or Al, you know, would have said, yeah, well, she would lose time. And yeah, sometimes she did appear different. And sometimes she did appear that she was, you know, essentially a different person. None of them said that, right? So we are still talking hypothetically because none of them said that. But even if they had, even if her family, the jail, the people at the jail noticed, and even if she had a diagnosis of DID that had been confirmed, it still does not mean she's insane. And this trial hinges on that one thing, insanity, because she's pled not guilty by reason of insanity. So she's got to be able to prove, or at least put in the jury's minds a reasonable doubt, that she was indeed insane at the time that crime occurred. Right? But even if she has DID, and look, I'm happy to say, okay, you know, if the defense pulls something out of the bag that shows me that actually she may have DID, it still does not mean she was insane at the time the crime occurred. And if you go back to the live that I did, that was called "Is DID Your Only Defense?" I went through, it was only a short report. I'm sure it was that live that I did that in. And the not guilty by reason of insanity defense using DID has only been attempted a few times. And in the majority of those times, it's unsuccessful. The jury doesn't buy it. The jury will just find them guilty because the jury doesn't buy that they were insane because of DID. Because DID isn't an automatic, it's not an automatic diagnosis of insanity. To be classified as legally insane, i.e., you could not tell right from wrong, you were psychotic, you were outside of the realms of reality, and you committed this heinous crime without even knowing it because you were in this acute state of psychosis. That's insanity from a legal standpoint. That's why the prosecution, every witness, you know, they've said, you know, did Miss Stauch, in your opinion, know right from wrong? And yeah, she absolutely knew right from wrong. You see, the thing is, if you don't know right from wrong, if you're in a state of acute psychosis, you're not able to function in your everyday life. Now, let's take a look at, I've just noticed, Dawn, remember, for 15 months, the defense is not doing well and the jury sees it. The defense are not doing well at all. Not doing well at all. I am going to talk about that, actually. And we've also got Candalee, remember, for 11 months. Letecia is evil, not insane. I completely agree. Totally agree. Was Charles Manson even labelled insane? I don't know the answer to that, actually. That's a very good question. Don't know the answer to that. I'm mulling over the Charles Manson one now. I feel like I need to go and look that up, but I'm not going to do it right now. But if we take January 27th, 2020, look at all the things she was able to do that proves that she knew right from wrong. that she was able to drive a car. She was able to do shopping. She was able to talk to the cops. She was able to do a huge amount of cleaning up after a murder. Why would she clean up after a murder? Because she knew it was wrong. Well, arguably. She knew she was going to get caught if she didn't do the cleaning. She knew she was going to get caught if she didn't tell the cops a lie. And nobody suspected anything was wrong, did they? You know, she didn't crash. She wasn't pulled over for not abiding by the laws of the road. She didn't go into Petco and steal those dog coats, did she? She knew that she had to pay for those dog coats. And that was only, what, 2 hours, 2.5 hours before she murdered Gannon. So the question becomes, is it possible to be insane just for that moment when you are murdering your stepson and be completely sane previous to that, in the hours previous to that, and then in the hours after that? Does that sound like the definition of insanity to you? You're not just sane and then you're insane and then you're sane again. The legally defined insane defense, surely the defense has to be able to... Oh, I'm just getting a note. Do you want...
No.
I can't read it. It's dark in here. Do you have an estimated finish time? Why?
I'm going to sleep at some point.
Well, I'll speak quietly. My son just came in saying he wants to go to sleep. He can't go to sleep because I'm being loud. So I'll speak quietly. I'll speak very quietly, which isn't easy for me. So in order for this defense to work, she would have had to have behaved in a way that showed that she was in an acute state of psychosis, and she wasn't, which is one of the reasons why I find it so incredulous why she's chosen to lie about DID, which gives me a little bit of, well, would you really choose that disorder to lie about if you were gonna, you could open the DSM-5 and you could pick any disorder out of the DSM-5 to make up and say, right, I'm going to say I've got that, and then I'll claim that I'm insane, and therefore they'll have to just send me to a mental hospital for a year or 2 years, and I'll get evaluated, and hey presto, I'm better now, and they're going to release me. Because that's potentially what could happen, right? You know, you periodically get evaluated when you're sent away to a mental institution because you've committed a crime and you are truly mentally ill and you're not making it up. Well, you get evaluated every however often it is. Now, the truly insane, let's say, for example, let's take Ian Brady. I don't know how many of my US audience will know Ian Brady. He was the male half of the Moors murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. And he was insane, very, very mentally unwell. Now, whether he was mentally unwell at the time that he committed the horrible murders against those poor children, but he was housed in a secure psychiatric hospital, actually quite close to here, called Ashworth Hospital. That was where he was housed for not his whole sentence, but certainly for many years. And there was no way in the world he was ever going to be released. And you know, however sane he appeared to be, because he was just a complete manipulator and a liar, they knew he was lying, and he never got released. He died eventually. I think he died. I know Myra Hindley definitely died, but yeah, anyway. But it is possible, which is the concern, that Letecia she thinks she's so much cleverer than everybody else. She thinks if she gets sent to a psychiatric hospital, well, in a year's time or 2 years' time or 5 years' time, she can just prove that she's sane again and she'll get released. That's what she's hoping. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the jury are buying it. Anyway, but if the truly insane person was to commit a murder of an 11-year-old boy that you knew very well, who was your stepson, and you were just temporarily insane for that point, that moment when you were stabbing him 18 times and hitting him over the head and then shooting him, firing 3 shots at him, just for that period, just for that, however long that took, it doesn't account for everything else she did in that day. And we also know that it wasn't just the 27th, was it? Where she was doing strange things. I mean, throughout this trial, I've become more and more convinced that she intentionally burnt Gannon on the Sunday night. I don't know how any of you feel about that. Because up to this trial, I thought that the candle incident was Gannon had knocked over a candle. I didn't know about the burns that he had. That came as a complete shock to me. Oh, we've got some members here. Daughter of Scotland, member for 21 months. Wow, thank you. Nearly 2 years. Dawn, welcome. Welcome to memberships. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I didn't know about the burns. I knew about the candle because we'd seen that video. But what we hadn't heard, or certainly what I hadn't heard, was the very end of that video, where Gannon says, I'm just concerned about my burns. I'm worried about my burns. Like that, I just went sick when that came out. And look, guys, to get burnt, and when they held up that candle, it was only a small candle. It wasn't like, I was imagining a big candlestick and one of those big long candles that can fall over. And yeah, if it hit you, you could burn yourself before it put itself out. But it's one of those safety candles. I have them because I knock stuff over. I'm clumsy. And they're really difficult to knock over. But if you do knock one over, it just goes out. The wax puts it out. So I've convinced myself, I think, but I think she burnt him. I think she did that on purpose. Now, whether she tried to burn the house down with Gannon in it, I don't know. But if we take... Now, obviously, at the autopsy, they couldn't tell how badly Gannon had been burnt. So we only have to... I guess we can only take the murder of what the injuries that can be proven. So we've got 18 stab wounds. We've got 4 blunt force trauma injuries. One of those is a fractured skull, I might add. And then 3 shots. So any of those 3 different violent ways to potentially murder someone, you know, if you stab someone 18 times, the likelihood is they're going to die. If you hit them over the head to the point that they've got a fractured skull, the chances are they're going to die. And then if you shoot them in the jaw, the chances are they're going to die. She did all 3. She did all 3. Now, nobody's telling me that she would be able to drive a car, go to the shops, and then come home, commit a murder, and then clean it all up. And imagine the state of Gannon's room. Look at all the places where they found traces of blood. The fact that she was able to hide his body, the fact that she was able to call the cops while Gannon's dead body was hidden somewhere in a suitcase, probably in the trunk of her car, I would imagine. And then speak to the cops as if nothing had happened. To me, that sounds like somebody who is a very, very manipulative and very adept liar. And unfortunately for Letecia, there is no condition in the DSM-5, or any of the DSM variations, where compulsive liar automatically gives you a free pass as a legally insane person. No such definition or diagnosis or condition exists. So what you've got to boil it down to is this woman is evil. This is an act of pure evil. So I could have understood her, though. I could have understood her trying to say that she was psychotic, that something snapped and pushed her over the edge, because that does happen. That can happen, right? And she had a period of psychosis. But I think she knows, I think she's clever enough to know that the behavior that she exhibited immediately afterwards wasn't one of a psychotic person. And I think that's possibly why she's chosen DID. But I'll circle back to even if it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that she does have DID, it doesn't mean she's insane. That she was insane then, or that she's incompetent now. We know that she's passed competency evaluations. We know that. But competency and insanity are not the same, legally speaking. Competency is are you able to understand right now? Are you competent to understand what's going on in the courtroom and understand that you're on trial? Insanity, legal insanity, is at the time the crime occurred. But DID, dissociative identity disorder, is not insanity. It's not. And that's why the DID defense is such a bad one. Such a bad one. Why our attorneys have chosen to go with this, I've got no idea. Maybe it's because Letecia insisted and they've just worked with what they've got. And maybe that's why they've been completely disinterested and seemed like asleep. And they've thought, right, This is our only defense. We'll pull it out the bag once the mental health experts get on the stand. Yeah, Emily, I forgot about that. Yeah, the hydrocodone. Does she have a criminal record? No. I think she'd never been to jail before. There was nothing, if there was anything on her record, it wasn't very much. With DID, you're no more likely to commit a crime if you have DID than you are if you don't have it. She does have a record of DV, does she? There you go then. So yeah, she'd also drugged him. I'd be interested to know how much hydrocodone was in his system. Mind you, though, having given the amount of time between him ingesting that and being found, it might not be very reliable anyway. But yeah, she also drugged him. So we've got burning, drugging, stabbing, blunt force trauma, and shooting. I mean, how many other ways can you try to kill someone? And this is over. This is not just somebody snapping, just having this, fit of rage and snapping. That is not snapping. So people with DID, no more likely to commit crimes than those that don't have it. People with DID can live perfectly functional lives. One of the main issues with DID is understanding your disorder, is understanding your condition. And as long as you understand your condition and you have any comorbid disorders that might have come from that, you've got those under control, then you can live a perfectly functional life. People with DID can have a job. People with DID can have a normal life. Now, there's many that can't. There's many that really can't function very well. But DID does not equal insanity. And I'm hoping that either the prosecution or one of the jury asks that question. Because the defense today, Will Cook, in his cross-examination of the jail psychologist, can't remember her name, he just sounded petty and a little bit childish. So if that's the best he's got to offer, then the jury are definitely not going to buy it. In my opinion, which is good. Which is good. So anyway, that's my opinion. In a nutshell, I don't think she's got DID, but even if she does, it doesn't mean she's insane. And I don't believe she was insane when she murdered Gannon. That was an act of pure evil rather than an act of somebody who was so deep in the realms of psychosis that she didn't understand what she was doing. None of it makes sense. None of it makes sense. From the lens of DID, doesn't make sense. Anyway, I did put Q&A on the title. I do actually think she's anxious. I think the diagnosis of general anxiety disorder, I think that's probably right. Very calculated, absolutely, very calculated. Better dogs hate her. You see, the thing is, if only dogs could talk, how many cases do we cover where dogs are the only witnesses? How many? I mean, just about every case that I've ever covered on this channel, there's a dog somewhere involved, you know, who was there, who could tell you exactly what happened. You know, we've got Dieter from the Chris Watts case. We've got Summer Wells. How many dogs were on the property? 13 dogs that they had at the time. Surely one of those witnessed whatever happened to Summer. We've got Nicola Bully, Willow. We've got this one. She, you know, there's 2 dogs, an English bulldog and a French bulldog. And if I had to pick a diagnosis for Letecia, I would say that she's got narcissistic personality disorder for sure. And there's also probably some traits of borderline in there as well. Now, narcissistic and borderline personality disorder are in the same cluster. They're not called clusters now, I don't think, in the DSM-5, but they're both considered emotionally unstable personality disorders. So I think narcissism for sure, and then she's got some traits of borderline as well. No, narcissists are not considered insane. No, there is not one disorder that gives you an automatic insanity pass. Not one. Not one. Schizophrenia would probably be the closest, in that unless it's controlled, you are in psychosis where you lose grip of reality. Psychopaths are not insane. Psychopaths might do insane things or have the capability to do insane things, but no. If you look at the legal definition of insanity, it all boils down to, are you able to tell right from wrong? Are you able to understand the reality that you are in? And psychopaths can actually do very well at that. They choose to do bad things. It's not their disorder that's choosing for them. Did you know there was a study done? I'll have to dig out the study. There was a study done on psychopathic traits in different occupations, and they managed this study. These authors were able to get responses from CEOs of some really big companies, and CEOs of major companies are much more likely than the average person to measure high on psychopathy. And they've done very, very well with their life because they've chosen to use their lack of empathy and lack of remorse in a way that benefits them to make a lot of money. And also, arguably, to be very productive members of society. So no, there's not one disorder in the DSM that gives you an automatic pass. DID is dissociative identity disorder. There's a book that's called The Psychopath Test. You can do a psychopath test. There is one. There's several, actually. On one of my lives, I did the dark triad test. I think it was one of the lives I did on Brian Koberger. So the dark triad is narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. And if you measure high on all of those 3, Machiavellianism is like enjoying power and control. If you measure high on all of those three, then you're probably higher than average going to commit a crime. But even that doesn't mean you're insane when you do it. Uncontrolled schizophrenia, where you're in active psychosis, is the closest that you're going to get to somebody who is legally insane. Somebody in active psychosis, whether it be through schizophrenia or through another way that you might get a psychotic disorder, like drugs, for example, you could potentially commit a crime and get away with it, as in not get away with it, but as in you truly, genuinely could plead not guilty by reason of insanity. But that's not Letecia. It's not Letecia. My stepbrother had schizophrenia, so I know that condition very, very, very well. He was diagnosed when he was 19, but it was back in the 1980s when the antipsychotic drugs really weren't very good. Clozapine, which does I think probably most schizophrenics now have clozapine or a derivative of clozapine. I don't know what that would be called in the US. I don't know whether it has a different brand name, but I know it as clozapine. And clozapine had literally just come onto the market when Ian was, he was probably a few months or maybe a year in. He was diagnosed at the age of 19, and the drugs that they had him on then just did not work for him, and he was in active psychosis for months on end, and he was living with us, and it was an absolute nightmare. It was a nightmare. I was 14. And it's one of the reasons, actually, why I went into psychology, because I saw it. I saw what true psychosis is actually like. But once they got him on clozapine, his symptoms improved massively. But he still was, he'd still hear voices. He'd still go into psychosis. You know, you could be talking to him and he'd not be there. And then he'd just snap back too. But it was nothing like what he was like before he had clozapine. Nothing like it. Like it was a wonder drug. It gave him many good years. He died. The downside of clozapine is it causes a lot of damage to your body, like in the dosage he needed to take. Plus the fact that he just wouldn't stop eating, or he was also drinking alcohol when he shouldn't, and he had a massive heart attack and he died. But anyway, he had many good years that he would not have had. Like he was sectioned for months and months on end before he was on clozapine, but he was able, once he was stabilized, he was able to live in the community. So I understand psychosis very well. I've lived with it. And that's not Letecia. If Ian had gone and murdered somebody in that period of active psychosis, I would not have been surprised. And that was what my dad, his biological father, was terrified of. Like every time he went out, he was terrified that Ian was going to do something to somebody. And Ian didn't have an aggressive bone in his body. It was way more likely he would have hurt himself rather than anyone else. But there was always that fear that you didn't know what the voices were going to tell him. Because he talked to us. about what the voices were telling him. He talked to us about, it was always God. God was the voice. And the voice, the God, was telling him to go and murder people. And he'd actually say that God has told me to go and murder this person. And it'd be like one of our neighbors. And we were like, oh my God, you know, like, please, please, please don't act on it. Please don't act on it. You know, it's a voice, don't you? You know, it's a voice. Yeah, but I've seen him. I've seen him. And oh man. Oh man. And he was saying things like, God's put a device in my brain and that's how he communicates with me. It's absolutely awful. So if Ian had gone and committed a murder, that would have made sense. But that is not Letecia. That would have been true legal insanity. What Letecia is doing is making a mockery of all of the thousands of people who have genuine, serious mental illness. Right? I'm not saying that anxiety disorders aren't bad, right? Because if you've had anxiety, I've never had anxiety. I can't pretend that I have, but I do know people who've had anxiety, and it's horrible. My mother suffers from anxiety. It's horrible. It can be very disabling. It can be debilitating. But it's nothing like looking at somebody, living with somebody for months on end who is in active psychosis. It's nothing like it. And for somebody to lie and say that they've murdered their 11-year-old stepson in the most heinous way because they were insane, it makes a mockery of all of the thousands of people who suffer from severe mental illness. So there you are. That's my opinion. So I'll answer some questions now, because I did. That's what I said I was going to do. So let's look back in the chat to see if there's questions. There is no way she's genuine. There's no way. Nothing. Not one speck. Not one thing in this entire trial so far has convinced me that she was in any way insane at the time she murdered Gannon. Not at all. Quite the contrary. She was very in control. Very in control. Exactly, logical one. Exactly. It's insulting that she'd even attempt this. Yeah. Yeah. I really don't think it's going to work for her. I really do not think it will work for her. I don't think the jury are buying it. Just based on some of the questions that they've asked, I don't think they're buying it. But you never know, you know, once they get deliberating. I'm going to... What's next? Dementia. Yeah. Yeah. I think probably dementia. Somebody in an advanced state of dementia could genuinely, if they committed a crime, could genuinely use an insanity defense. So, yeah, advanced dementia could probably genuinely use that defense. She's a disgrace to she's a disgrace to everybody. Anybody with mental illness, she's a disgrace to. An absolute, total disgrace. Yeah, they are. They are. When they brought up COVID. Oh, this afternoon. Oh, when they brought up COVID. Like, trying to imply that she wasn't able to get like a proper evaluation or speak to the psychologist properly because of COVID. I was outside actually, and I had my ear things in, And I was just in my backyard shaking my head like, oh no, they're not using the COVID. They're not using COVID. Oh dear, that is desperate. That is desperate. Oh, I got a question here. Do you think she planned to plead insanity from the very beginning? I think maybe once she was arrested and Gannon's body had been found, because the thing is, I think she thought that Gannon would never be found. And she probably thought that a murder charge wasn't going to stick because there's no body. So once Gannon's body was found, then she's probably been sitting in her cell trying to think of ways she can get herself out of it, you know, rather than trying to escape or the ridiculous other things she tried to do. And I think it probably dawned on her that she's going to spend the rest of her life in jail if she doesn't pull something spectacular out of the bag. And I think she, as the psychologist testified to this afternoon, that once the issue of competency came up, she started to exhibit these bizarre signs that she'd not had before. So I think it developed. I think she realized she could play on that and say, oh, well, I was insane. And these attorneys that she's got have allowed her to do that. That was hilarious. That was the best point of the trial so far. I mean, she said SA triggers her. That's maybe where Eduardo fits in her mind. Yeah, she's not said that though, has she? I mean, we don't know yet how the defense. I mean, we'll know more about how the defense are going to try to fit in all of these stories. You know, if you were that triggered by SA, why would you claim that you'd been SA'd as part of the murder? Why would you claim that? You know, that kind of doesn't make sense. Yeah, I wasn't really sure where they were going with that, honestly. I wasn't really sure where they were going with that. I think they were trying to say that I think they were trying to say that if she'd been abused as a child, then no, that doesn't even work. I don't really know what they were trying to get at that. So what would they have to prove after they prove she got DID? They'll have to prove that she did not know right from wrong, that she wasn't in a grip of reality, that she was outside of reality, that she was in such a state of altered consciousness that she did not know right from wrong in that moment. That's why the prosecution have been asking every witness. If you look back on some of the questions that the prosecution have asked, they usually ask them towards the end of every witness. They'll say, in your opinion, do you believe that Letecia knew right from wrong? Or do you believe that she, was she able to drive? Was she able to work? Was she able to function? And they did that in various ways, and they did it more in some witnesses than others. But they're going to have to prove that she was essentially psychotic at the time that the murders occurred, that she wasn't in in reality, and that is not DID. Even if you have even if your body is being controlled by an alternate personality, you would have to prove that that alternate personality was insane. And that's a bit tall order. Up to today, I thought our attorneys were, quite frankly, bored by the whole thing. Bored and just sick of sitting there. And today, I think we've seen a little bit of fire, because they know that they've got to try everything to discredit the mental health professionals that the prosecution call to the stand. And I think they did it Will Cook did it very badly this afternoon. He did it very badly, and that's all I can say. I don't think a defence are very good. But at the same time, I don't think we've seen, they've got cards up their sleeve. We haven't seen that yet. So it's a little bit early to really see what the defence have got up their sleeve. I'd imagine her IQ is fairly high. I don't think it's a question of IQ. I think it's a irrational belief that she's cleverer than everyone else. Oh, just another question about her lawyers. I just answered that one, Sherba. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she can't breathe. She can't breathe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, surely, right, they'd have a record of the Zoom or the WebEx meetings, like right at the end where they had that conversation about bringing up what one of her previous attorneys, I think they were trying to ask, could they bring them up as a witness? Surely the jail would have a record of the Zoom or WebEx meetings that have been done. Surely they have that somewhere. Surely they don't just let anybody log on to WebEx and speak to their prisoners. Pretty sure that they don't. So the jail will have a record. You just need to call the jail. I think this is a last-ditch attempt. And I think she thinks she'll get away with it. I really do. I think that's why she's all smiley and happy today, because this is her big chance. How can the defence psychologist say she has DID? Well, it's Dorothy Lewis, Dr. Dorothy Lewis, that's going to testify for the defence, and she's a pretty controversial figure. If you go and look up Dr. Dorothy Lewis, she's pretty controversial. But yeah, I mean, she could, all Letecia has to say is, yeah, I missed time. Like there's, hours go by and I don't know what happened. And I become a different person. I've got another personality who's called Maria, who's Spanish. And I've got another personality called Harmony and another personality called whatever else she's called. She can just make it up. She can make it up. Yeah, that would help actually. It's difficult to pick out the questions. Are juries more inclined to accept insanity when the crime is heinous? Does cognitive dissonance play a part? It's difficult. I don't know the answer. I could give an opinion. I don't think so, actually. There's so many. There's so. You see, the problem is there's so few cases where the insanity defense is actually used. And then only a small fraction of those prove successful, i.e., the jury finds them not guilty. So there's not very many cases to really fully assess. And there's even less, like there's literally a handful that have used DID. So I think a jury would say, like, the first kind of gut reaction would be, well, they've got to be insane to commit such a heinous act. They had to be insane. But once they understand what the legal definition of insanity is, and then they look at the facts of the case alongside that legal definition of insanity, then in the vast, vast majority of crimes, it's easy to see that this is a lie. And Letecia's case is a perfect example of that. The facts of the case do not support the legal definition of a crime being committed under the guise of insanity. I'm way past the chat now. I think the jury will find her guilty. I think it will be pretty easy. I can't see the deliberations going longer than a few hours. I can't see it being difficult for them. That's my prediction. I have been wrong before, but that's my prediction. What is Gannon's dad's role in all of the abuse? I don't think Al had a clue what was going on when he was away. I really don't. I don't think Al had any idea what was going on. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah. No, I don't think Al had a clue. And I saw a question earlier on. I can't find it now. I did go up to try to find it, but do I think that she'd been abusing him before? I think probably, yeah, but maybe in a milder, not that abuse of any kind is mild, but in a less obvious way. I think she probably was, like, probably physically abusing him. Like Harley said that, you know, she would get a backhander, like Letecia would give her a backhander. And that's her biological daughter. So I think Gannon probably did suffer abuse. And if it wasn't physical, it was certainly emotional. I just don't think she liked him. And quite often in households where children are abused, it's one child that takes the brunt of it. Unfortunately, one child, for whatever reason, is targeted. And that can be in all forms of abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual. One child tends to get the brunt. Not in all cases. In many households, all the children in the household are abused in one way or another. But in that household, I would imagine that Gannon took the brunt of it for whatever reason. She didn't like him, whether it was to do with the fact he was a boy, or the fact that he had ADHD, or the fact that whatever, right? Maybe he was a little bit of a, harder to handle than the girls. Or maybe Gannon was a beautiful, sweet, charming, funny little boy, and she just hated him. And there was nothing at all that Gannon could have done any differently. And I just wish that Letecia had never even met that family. But I don't think Al knew. I really don't. Ooh. I did an IQ test once. I can't remember what score I got. It was about 130, I think. Would you prefer this case or a potential case against Candice? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. I really don't know what you mean by that. Would I prefer this case? I don't want any child. I don't want any case. I don't want any child to be abused or go missing, or I don't really know how to answer that. If she waives privilege, can prosecutors ask about anything that was discussed? I think so, yeah. I think so. But like he said, the judge said he'd have to have a long conversation with her. So I don't have yeah, harmony or disharmony, yeah. I don't think it's going to happen. Oh, Jasmine, that was the other one that I was trying to think of. Yeah, Jasmine. Was the West trial back today? That's a good question. I think so. I think the West trial's back. I'm not really sure what's going on with the West trial. Like, they keep having, like, they had a week off, and then they had some days off, and it's like, what? Can't even. The fact that there's 3 trials going on at the same time is bad enough, but when one just keeps like disappearing for days on end, I forget to go and check. Oh yeah, it can be terrifying. Absolutely. Psychosis is terrifying because you can't calm them down, you can't reason with them. They don't even necessarily recognize you. It can be very, very scary. Yeah. Now, in fairness, DID actually can be subtle in some people. It's not like it appears in the movies. But I would imagine that a child of someone with DID would at least notice something about that kind of condition. Who have we got here? Sonia, member for 12 months. Hello. I have to look on YouTube to see these questions. These member, I've been a member for so many months. They don't show on StreamYard. It's so annoying. I have to keep looking at YouTube, and often I forget. Okay. Right, I'm going to go down to the bottom of the chat. I think she'll probably claim that. Oh, God knows. She'll probably claim that she was badly treated, and she'll put in loads of complaints, and she'll try to appeal, and hopefully it will just fall on deaf ears, and hopefully she'll just get locked up. She'll get completely locked up. Questions. I'm really sorry if I'm missing questions, but it's difficult to spot them. Do you think she was going to do something to Gannon on that hike? No, I don't think so, because Lena was there and Harley was meant to go on the hike, but then she got called into work. So no, I don't think the hike itself was the place that she was going to do it. It could be jealousy. It could be all wrapped up in jealousy, that maybe, you know, she was jealous of the relationship that Al and Gannon had. As like a father and son kind of team. Maybe she was jealous, yeah. That could be part of the reason why she hated him. No, it's not, because Colorado got rid of the death penalty. So no. Unfortunately, I'd like to see her fry. I know that not everybody agrees with me when I show my support for the death penalty. But I think in cases where people murder children, I think they should fry them. Yeah, it is a condition that you're not cured of it, but you can manage it, and you can manage it very well. So it's the same with like bipolar or even a personality disorder. If you manage it, you can live a very functional life, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to ruin your life. You know, there are DID is rare, but there are people who are very functional with DID. If Letecia was not found to be legally insane, do you think she will act out in court when the verdict is read? I don't know. Little Lucia. Oh yeah, that's another one. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe one of her alternate personalities will take over, but it'd be, yeah. I think she'll appeal whatever. I think she'll try to get out as soon as she can. If she's found not guilty, if just by sheer luck that the jury buy it, which I don't think they will, that she'll sit there in a prison cell and she'll be plotting her appeal. And if she is found not guilty by reason of insanity, then she'll think that she'll be able to get out in a year, because hey presto, she'll be sane now and she'll be all better. Her DID will have gone away. Yeah. I only saw that film once, and I know that it was based on a real case, but hasn't it come out since that part of that was made up? But no, the way that DID is portrayed in movies is often not the way it is in reality. I mean, there are some cases in DID where, you know, people are very, very dysfunctional and really struggle, but more often than not, DID is much more subtle. No, it doesn't necessarily have to stay consistent. You could go through long periods where none of your alternate personalities come to the front. It depends what the triggers are. In some people with DID, that an alternate personality will come to the front when there's a particular trigger, like stress or feeling threatened or something like that. But no, it doesn't necessarily stay consistent. Well, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to wrap up now anyway, but I'm just having a chat, really. I've given my opinion on how the trial's going, and I'm just answering some questions now. Eye for an eye, yeah. I agree. So let's stab her, hit her over the head and fracture her skull and then shoot her in the jaw. Let's do that. He has remarried, yeah. I don't know whether he's got a baby son, but I know that he's got his wife's been in the court with him. Oh, there you go. He's got another child. Right, I'm going to go down to the chat now, down to the bottom. Can lawyers get a mistrial at all? Well, a mistrial, like if, let's say, for example, one of the jurors are found talking about it online, that's a good grounds for a mistrial. But there's loads of grounds for a mistrial. I don't think at the moment there's grounds to call a mistrial. I think the jury questions are very good. I think the jury questions have been spot on. And just the types of questions that they're asking, like the question that the juror asked to the psychologist today, I can't remember it, but I just know I thought, yes, that is a very good question. So they're clearly intelligent and really on board with, you know, the trial. They're not just sitting there wishing they weren't there. I don't know that DID, you could say DID if let's say, for example, Letecia had DID, which I don't think she has, but DID is not inherited. It's a trauma-related disorder. It develops through trauma. Now, there might be a genetic susceptibility to somebody who's able to dissociate easily, but dissociation isn't, dissociation itself isn't automatically a DID diagnosis either. Anxiety, there's potentially an inherited component to that. There's potentially an inherited component to depression even. But usually it's not a, you know, just because your mother's got it that you're going to have it. Like my mother has had anxiety all her life. She's incredibly anxious. I'm not, and neither's my sister. we're way more laid back than she is even on her mildest day. So it's definitely not it's definitely not something that you would say, oh, well, because your mother's got it, then you're going to get it. There might be a component, a susceptibility, but it's not It's probably more to do with the environment you're brought up in. But having said that, there are many people, many thousands of people who grow up having suffered horrendous abuse, and they don't get DID. They don't have post-traumatic stress disorder. They don't even have depression or anxiety. They're unscathed, which is bizarre. They remember the abuse, but they come out of it resilient. There's so many people that I've met, both personally and professionally, who have suffered from horrible abuse or horrible loss in childhood and have no diagnosable mental disorders. They're just really resilient. And resilience is something that, yes, you can develop resilience, but in my opinion, you either have it or you don't. You're either resilient or you're not. Do I think generalized anxiety disorder could have contributed to the murder or contributed to DID? Because anxiety, people with DID are sometimes anxious, but it tends to be that they're anxious about their life because they don't know when they're going to switch into an alternate personality. They can't control it, like Letecia seems to think you can, right? You don't just switch to another personality. It's involuntary. So, yeah. You don't just suddenly decide that you're going to be manic or suddenly decide that you're going to be an alternate personality. I'm sorry, mental illness doesn't work like that. So she was wrong there. Sasha, member for 13 months. Have you met anyone with DID in your career? Yes. I have. I've met way more people who have suffered from horrendous abuse and have not got DID. The vast majority of people who suffer abuse in childhood don't go on to get DID. I think probably the dissociation that people experience, or dissociative disorders people experience, are on a continuum. So even if you fulfill the criteria for a dissociative disorder, it doesn't necessarily mean you also fill the criteria for DID, because there's other forms of dissociative disorder, and some of those can be temporary. So let's say, for example, somebody who has post-traumatic stress disorder because of being in combat, or because they were a victim of a crime, or because they had a horrible accident and they developed post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the comorbidities of post-traumatic stress disorder, or actually one of the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, can be flashbacks, and that's a form of dissociation. And that can be temporary. So when I say that DID, there's no cure for DID, I'm not talking about all forms of dissociative disorder, because some forms of dissociative disorder are temporary and are contingent on a particular life experience that you resolve. Helen, thank you for the £10. Can she actually speak Spanish? And what if somebody with DID bumped off her daughter's father? Oh, Helen, you've asked me a very Very difficult question. I don't know if she can actually speak Spanish. That's a good question. Does anybody know if she can actually speak Spanish? And what if someone with DID bumped off her daughter's father? And you're thinking that's where she got the idea from? I don't know. That's very, very good, Helen. And I know that it's 1:30 in the morning for you as well. Your brain's obviously working better than mine is at the moment. I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress generally is common in society. Oh, okay. Oh, missed it. She was from the Spanish community in Florida originally. Oh, was she? Maybe she can speak Spanish. Oh, she can't speak Spanish. There we go. It came up in court. She can't speak Spanish. She could still put on a Spanish accent, though, couldn't she? Harley's dad wasn't murdered, he overdosed. Letecia had lied about his death to Harley. Yeah, she did. Ah, did he overdose or was he forced to take drugs? Letecia might know. Letecia might be one of Leticia's many lies. Yeah, there's a lot that is said about DID that isn't necessarily true. Not that DID is very real, but I'm yet to be convinced about the people who claim to have really intricate skills that they don't have, that they haven't learned somewhere else. Like playing a piano, to play a piano well takes years of practice. So unless you've been, your alternate personality has been practicing for years, then that alternate personality isn't just going to be able to go to a piano and start playing. Did I get a package from Tennessee? No, but hang fire, because what I've learnt about my PO box is that it seems, because I've told the post office that I want them to deliver it to my house. So I think what happens is the PO box stuff sits on a shelf for ages until somebody realizes that, oh, there's several packages for that house, we better take them. Because what tends to happen is several will turn up at the same time. I don't get any for ages, and then 2 or 3 will turn up on the same day. Now, if I went to the post office sorting office, I could just go and pick it up, but I'm lazy. And I'd have to go into town, and it's 3 miles, and I can't be bothered. So it's a service that the post office does, that they will deliver it to my house. But it takes a while. So not at the moment, but that doesn't mean to say that it's been lost, because I've had this twice now with someone else who's maybe still in the chat, who sent stuff from the US, and it's took ages to arrive, and it's probably because it's been sat on a shelf 3 miles away from my house, probably for like weeks. So it will arrive. It will just be sat there waiting to be delivered. But thank you in advance. Thank you in advance. We've just got to be a little patient. I think it probably is. I think it's probably an exaggeration. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm not saying it's completely impossible, because some people can pick up a musical instrument and start to play, right? I should do an unboxing. I did a couple of unboxing videos actually on Tilly and Cassie's channels, and I found it a little bit. I found it awkward because I'm really clumsy, and it takes me about 5 minutes to even open one box. So I felt a bit weird. It was good, but I love getting parcels. But I felt a little bit of pressure that I've got to open this box like really quickly. That's right. She could teach. Yeah. So she was able to, you know, control a classroom, to control a class of kids. So DID wouldn't preclude her from being a teacher, but having bouts of insanity absolutely would do, because she wouldn't know right from wrong. She'd just let the kids run riot. So it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. My son's probably going to murder me because I've probably been a lot louder than I anticipated. I did say oh, he's just shouted through absolutely, and it's gone 1:30. He's been trying to get to sleep. He should have just put earpods in or something. So I better go, or else I'm going to get shouted at. All right, guys. Thank you so much for keeping me company. What a nice chat. And it's back to it tomorrow. Hopefully court isn't snowed off. But yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for being respectful in the chat. Thank you, as always, to the moderators. Thank you for the donations. Welcome to the new members. And I'll see you very soon. Bye, guys.